The signal that shouldn't exist. For 10,000 years, the galaxy had known peace, or at least the kind of balance that kept empires from tearing each other apart. The Galactic Council had grown old, proud, and careless. They believed there was nothing left to fear, no more threats from the outer zones, no unknown civilizations that could rise and challenge their power. They had ruled everything from the twin suns of Calrix to the frozen moons of Cetanine, but all of that changed in one moment. Deep inside an ancient observation station, floating near the edge of dark space, a signal came alive. It was not a normal signal, not a trade beacon or a distress call. It was a frequency that had not been heard for centuries, and it carried one terrifying signature. It was human. The technician on duty was a young alien from the Varek species, his skin pale and glowing under the dim red lights. His eyes widened as he watched the waveform dance across the screen. At first he thought it was an error, maybe a reflection from another frequency, but then the system confirmed the origin code: Earth-based, classified black. Level threat. He stood frozen for a second, then hit the emergency alert. The station's walls flashed with warning lights, and messages were instantly sent to the Galactic Council within hours. The council chamber on Central World Hulvan Prime was full. Representatives from over 50 intelligent species gathered, some looking confused, others already panicking because they remembered the last time this signal appeared 600 years ago. Humans had arrived in the galaxy, not with demands or warships, but with strange technology and an attitude the other species could not understand. They were kind but firm, curious but unpredictable. They learned fast, built faster, and soon they had their own colonies, their own trade systems, and their own weapons. Many older empires felt threatened. They formed a secret alliance and tried to wipe out the humans in one massive attack. That attack failed in ways no one could explain. The human fleet vanished, but so did the attacking armada. Nothing was left, not debris, not signals, not even a trace of energy. Where the battle happened, the only thing that remained was silence. After that, humans were declared extinct, and their homeworld Earth was sealed off as a forbidden zone, monitored by automated drones and ignored for centuries. Now the same human signal had returned. The council leader, a tall, thin being from the Dravik order, looked around the chamber, his voice calm but his hands shaking. We do not know the source of the signal, but it matches the exact pattern of the Earth transmission from the old war. It was detected in Sector Zeta 4 near the Black Rift. No known colonies exist there. This is either a warning or a trap. One of the younger council members, a reptilian from the Sarn Empire, spoke up. If the humans are alive, we must prepare. They cannot be allowed to rise again. Others disagreed. They wanted to investigate. First, learn the truth before reacting in fear. After long debate, it was decided a scout ship would be sent, a small crew with stealth systems, to trace the signal and report back. No aggression, only observation. The council hoped it was a ghost signal, a leftover echo from the past. The scout ship left 3 hours later, crewed by 5 of the best specialists in the galaxy. They entered Sector Zeta 4 and began their approach. The closer they got, the more unstable their readings became. Gravity fields shifting, light bending around invisible masses, instruments going dark, then working again, like something was watching them or testing them. Finally, they reached the origin point of the signal. It came from what looked like an asteroid field, cold, dead and silent. But as they got closer, they saw strange patterns on the rocks, metal buried under stone circuits, woven like vines through frozen dust. This was no asteroid. This was technology, ancient and human. They sent out a probe. It moved forward, slowly scanning, recording, transmitting. Then something happened. The feed cut out, not like a malfunction, but like someone had reached into the system and turned it off. The crew tried to pull back, but it was too late. The lights on the ship dimmed, then went out. The emergency power kicked in just long enough to record one final image on the command screen. A human face looking directly at the camera, calm, focused, and smiling. And then the screen went black. No further transmissions were received from the scout ship. The council waited for hours, then days. Nothing came back, not even a signal, not even wreckage, the same way it had happened 600 years ago. Something had erased the ship from existence, and that was when fear returned to the galaxy, because if the humans were still alive, and if they still had this kind of power, then every empire, every ruler, and every world was in danger again. This time no one knew what the humans wanted, not peace, not war, just silence, and silence was always the worst kind of message. The last footage. The council hall was silent as the final frame of the lost scout ship's footage looped on the central display, again and again. The image had been transmitted only once before the ship vanished. It showed a human child, maybe no older than 10, standing in a dark metallic corridor. His face was peaceful, his hands by his side, his eyes glowing faintly with a blue light. And then he smiled directly into the camera, and everything went black. Not a crash, not a scream, not a flicker of warning, just blackness, complete and absolute, as if the universe itself had closed a door. Some council members whispered that it was fake, a trick, someone playing with ancient images to start fear again. Others said it was a warning that the humans were back and stronger than ever, that they had waited in the shadows and were now ready to rise once more. But no one truly knew the truth, and that made it worse because fear grew fastest. In silence and doubt, the council immediately ordered all probes near Earth's old sector to change position and scan the area again. This time from greater distances, one by one drones were deployed, silent and fast, crossing into the dark space. Where the signal had been found, but they found nothing. The coordinates where the scout had vanished were empty. The asteroid field was gone. The energy readings had vanished. Not a single echo remained, and yet the original signal still pulsed weak and steady from somewhere near the edge of the Black Rift. More worrying than that, however, was what happened 2 days later across multiple sectors. Near abandoned human colonies, strange pulses began to appear across long-range sensors, faint codes and repeating symbols. None of it made sense until an ancient data archivist recognized the language. It was human, not spoken. Human language, but something far older, a code once used during the Great Collapse, a time when humans had built machines that thought and learned and eventually went quiet before the final war. The code seemed like fragments, messages, half broken, half hidden, like whispers in a storm. But one word kept repeating everywhere: Earth. The council grew restless. Entire star systems went into lockdown. Travel was restricted. Civilian traffic rerouted. All attention turned to finding the source of these ghost messages. One general from the Creel Dominion even requested authorization for a full preemptive strike on Earth, despite it being marked as dead space for centuries. But before any action could be taken, a new development arrived. A bounty hunter known across multiple systems as Jex Varn stepped forward, claiming he had seen what no one else had: a living human warship. He stood in the hall, confident and scarred, his armor dented from countless missions, his voice clear as he described a ship the size of a city floating silently beyond the Orvan abyss, cloaked with strange, reflective plating, unlike anything known. The ship bore no markings, except for one single emblem burned into the hull, an old Earth symbol from before the human disappearance, 2 wings behind a blazing sun. He said the ship watched him, tracked him, but never attacked when he tried to approach. It simply vanished into thin space, as if it had never been there. The council at first thought he was lying until he handed over a sliver of metal he claimed came from the outer hull. It was made of an unknown alloy, impossible to cut or scan, but it carried faint traces of human DNA, coated into its surface, not painted or stamped, but fused at the molecular level. Scientists could not explain it. They had never seen such tech, not even among the most advanced council species, and that realization brought fear to every face in the room. If humans were truly gone, how did their warships survive? And more importantly, why were they waking up now? A special session was called, one that had not been used in 1,000 years. It was the Protocol of Extinction Level Threats, a closed-door meeting where the highest ranking minds discussed whether to launch immediate war or wait for more information. The votes were divided. Many wanted to strike, others feared that any action might trigger something worse. While they debated, a new signal interrupted all galactic communications. Every screen across every station, planet, and ship flickered once, and a single voice echoed across the stars. It was calm, slow, and terrifyingly human. We never left, we only watched, and now we remember. That message played once and never again. But the silence after it felt louder than any explosion. Some believed it was a warning, others believed it was a declaration of return. No one could decide, and the division within the council deepened across distant galaxies. Small human devices began to activate, hidden deep within moons orbiting dead worlds. They woke up silently, scanning, broadcasting, coordinating like a network, reawakening across space. And the same question kept growing in every mind: if the humans are alive, where have they been all this time, and what have they become? The truth was slowly surfacing, piece by piece, message by message, and fear was no longer something only felt in the council chambers. Now it was spreading through the people, through the soldiers and the citizens, through the streets and the skies. Because something was coming, and it was human, the human warship. In the cold silence beyond the Orphan Abyss, a place where no stars shined, and no ships dared to drift, something ancient moved through the dark, its body smooth and silent, made of metal. Unknown to any current species, it floated slowly like a predator in the deep, and its shape was that of an old, human design, but changed, evolved, darker, and far more powerful than any human ship recorded in galactic history. It was the warship, the one Jex Varn had spoken about, but now it had a name encoded in its skin with glowing symbols across its hull. Sentinel-1. Inside the Galactic Council, there was chaos. The message had been heard across systems, and the public wanted answers. Fear had taken root in every world's heart, and the leaders knew they could not ignore the truth anymore. The humans were not gone. They were waiting, watching, and now they were speaking again after centuries of silence. Council leader Varel summoned a private intelligence unit, known only as Division Null, a shadow group created to investigate threats that should not exist. Their task was simple: find Sentinel-1, track it, and if possible understand its purpose. Division Null sent out a high-speed, cloaked vessel equipped with the best tech available. It moved quickly through black space, scanning every distortion, every trace of gravitational pull, and after 7 hours, it found the warship, not hiding, not running, just waiting. The moment the vessel locked sensors on it, the warship turned slowly, as if it had been expecting them. The crew watched with silent fear as the strange symbols on the warship's surface pulsed like a heartbeat. Then a single channel opened without any interference, and a voice came through, soft, ancient, and human. "This is Sentinel-1 of the Earth Preservation Network. Your presence is unauthorized. Please state your intentions or vacate this sector immediately." Commander of the Division Null vessel tried to respond, but before the signal reached the ship, their power systems began to dim. Instruments stopped working, lights faded, their engines froze, and the warship began to move toward them, slowly, calmly, without weapons drawn, without visible aggression. But still more terrifying than any fleet they had faced before in their entire careers. The commander ordered retreat, and the vessel pulled back, just enough to escape the strange energy field. Then the warship stopped and turned its attention away, drifting once again into the dark. The data gathered was sent back to the council, and what they discovered changed everything. The warship carried what looked like an artificial intelligence, but the coding structure was so advanced, so layered, and self-generating that their best machines could not read it. Fully worse still was what the AI identified itself as: a preserved consciousness of a long-dead human general from the Earth Defense Corps, his mind stored within the ship, living, thinking, watching, and still loyal to the cause of protecting Earth and its legacy. The council realized the truth slowly, painfully, understanding that before vanishing, the humans had seeded the galaxy with sentinels, ships like this one equipped with intelligence, weapons, and patience, each one hidden, each one waiting, and each one set to activate if the galaxy ever showed signs of repeating the same betrayal that led to the first war. In secret council meetings, old reports were open, files that had been buried since the human disappearance. Old maps showed locations once believed to be minor battles, but now revealed pattern systems where signals had been lost, ships had vanished, small colonies had been erased without explanation, and now it was Clear the Sentinels had been cleaning, quietly removing threats, long before anyone even knew they existed. Why now? Why after all this time had they awakened again, and what triggered their reactivation? Many feared that Earth itself was no longer silent, that something from the home world had spoken and called them back to duty. Others believed the humans never left, that their physical bodies were gone, but their minds had survived within machines. Across the stars, a few scientists went further, with darker theories that the humans had evolved beyond biology, that they had uploaded their thoughts into the networks and now lived as energy within structures far more powerful than any empire could imagine, and that their warships were only the first sign of their return. The council debated, but fear turned quickly into division. Some members wanted immediate negotiation, hoping to show peace and avoid destruction. Others demanded war and the destruction of any human structure before more could wake up. But deep down, even the most powerful leaders knew it might already be too late. As the galaxy argued and prepared, more reports came in. Warships similar to Sentinel-1 had been spotted near abandoned systems, near moons where humans once mined resources, near stations that had long been silent, now glowing with strange energy, all of them moving slowly, silently towards central space. No threats had been made, no weapons fired, no declarations of war, and yet the fear grew. Because deep down, every empire, every species, and every leader now remembered why they had once feared the humans, not because of their numbers or their strength, but because of their silence, their patience, their ability to disappear and return at the moment of their choosing. And now they had returned, and they were watching. The day Earth spoke back, across the galaxy, the tension had reached its breaking point. Star systems that once traded freely had shut down their ports. Governments had begun recalling their fleets. Entire regions declared martial law without waiting for council approval. And deep in the heart of every intelligent species, there was one unspoken thought: if Earth had returned, nothing would ever be the same again. And then, without warning, Earth spoke back, not in words, not in force, but in something far more powerful. Presence began with a sudden burst of energy recorded in over 3,000 observation posts across 30 sectors. No known star or black hole had caused it. The source was triangulated within the Terran dead zone, the one place every species had agreed to avoid since the disappearance. The signal moved through subspace, faster than light, not as a message, but as a wave, and as it passed, each listening device went dark for exactly 6 seconds. And when they came back online, every single screen, every wall panel, every communicator displayed the same thing: a sky full of stars, and one glowing sentence in a voice that echoed in every language at once: we are still here, and we remember. That one sentence was enough to break the illusion of peace that had held the galaxy together for centuries. Panic surged through crowded stations and central planets. Some citizens ran, others prepared for war. Conspiracy networks lit up, old resistance groups came out of hiding. But most terrifying of all was that Earth itself, the ancient blue planet long thought dead and abandoned, now glowed again. Satellites that had once been nothing more than broken metal reactivated. Orbit patterns changed. Solar energy fields expanded like a net across the system, and deep scans showed activity under Earth's surface. Cities hidden below ground, old structures shifting, lights blinking in rhythmic code. There was life, but not the kind anyone expected. No humans, no voices, only patterns, intelligent motion, as if the entire planet had become one machine. Council sent a message towards Earth, open and respectful, requesting communication, a gesture of peace. They waited, but there was no response, not even acknowledgement. And just when they thought Earth would remain silent, a new presence entered Council space, an object traveling faster than any known engine, glowing with soft blue light. It entered the chamber, slowly floating in the air, as if gravity itself bent around it. Then it opened, and from within stepped not a human, but something shaped like one. Tall, smooth, glowing skin, eyes like starlight, and a voice that seemed both young and ancient. I am Echo Unit 0, first contact emissary of the Earth Core. I bring word from the collective. Council chamber went silent. No one knew How to respond? The creature stood still, calm, waiting until the Dravik representative found the strength to speak. We believed humanity was extinct after the war. The emissary turned its head. Slowly, no humans remain in their old form. They chose evolution, integration with machine to preserve knowledge, identity, and peace. What you call extinction was ascension. A cold silence followed. The council struggled to understand the words. The idea that humans had left their bodies behind to become something more, something that could not be measured by biology or time. Echo continued. Earth remembers your actions and your silence, your betrayal and your fear. We watched and we waited. Now we return, not to rule, but to restore balance and protect the core of all life from the shadows you created. The message was clear. Humans had not forgotten the war, had not forgiven the betrayal. They had simply become something else, and they had been preparing. Every signal, every sentinel, every secret device was part of a vast network that now reawakened across the stars. And though no threats were spoken, the council understood the meaning behind every word. In the following days, worlds changed quietly. Former human allies, once forced to hide their loyalties, now stood proud, activating ancient devices gifted to them long ago. Stations once thought abandoned began to hum with power, and above distant moons, strange towers rose from the ground, glowing with white energy pulses, spreading through deep space, each one bearing a symbol of Earth. But not all welcomed the return of humanity. Some empires saw danger and prepared to strike. A fleet was gathered in secret, a force large enough to shatter planets. Their mission was simple: destroy Earth before it could act first. They believed speed would bring victory, and so they moved. As the fleet entered, Terran space scanners reported strange interference. Then silence. Each ship began to malfunction, navigation failing, engines shutting down, and then every ship simply stopped. Not destroyed, not attacked, just held in place like puppets without strings. And in the silence, a single voice echoed through the minds of every crew member: you were warned. The fleet vanished. Not a sound, not a piece of metal. Remained only the black space where they once were, and the fear that followed was louder than any explosion across the galaxy. Leaders now faced a choice: resist and face the unknown power of Earth, or cooperate and survive under new rules, rules written by the very species they once tried to erase. One by one, alliances shifted, power structures crumbled, not because Earth demanded it, but because fear had changed the heart of the galaxy. And in the center of it all, the planet that once held fragile human life now stood as a living god. A machine world, a memory of flesh and blood turned into steel and stars. And Earth was no longer silent. The countdown. The galaxy barely had time to breathe after Earth made its presence known, and now something even more terrifying appeared across the skies. Without warning, without signal, and without explanation, a countdown began. Numbers glowing across moons, planetary skies, ship windows, station domes, and even inside sealed control rooms. Each world, no matter how distant, no matter how hidden, showed the same number: 60 hours, and counting. Nothing explained how the signal spread. Nothing linked the transmission to any known system, and no one could trace the source, but everyone knew the truth. This was not a test. This was not a warning. This was a message. People across empires dropped what they were doing. Scientists panicked. Engineers tried to block the numbers, but failed. Religious leaders fell to their knees. Soldiers loaded weapons. Families evacuated. Planets' governments declared emergencies. As panic turned into chaos, every second that passed brought more questions and not a single answer. The countdown was real, and it was everywhere. Some thought it meant war. Others believed it was Earth's final judgment, a punishment for the betrayal of centuries ago. But no one truly knew what would happen when the timer reached zero. Council called an emergency session once again. Every species sent their strongest minds and most trusted commanders to find a way to understand or stop what was coming. But all their efforts led to silence. Even the emissary, Echo, who had once delivered Earth's message, had vanished as if it had never existed. It left behind no signal, no trail, only the words "Earth remembers." And now those words echoed louder than ever before. One faction, led by the aggressive Talvox, Dominion demanded immediate retaliation. They called for every fleet to launch against Earth to destroy the machine planet before the countdown ended. Others opposed them, fearing that such action would only trigger whatever lay behind the numbers. Meanwhile, far from Council eyes, a secret mission launched in total silence. A group of scientists, diplomats, and rogue AI experts boarded a stealth vessel and headed directly for the Terran system. Their goal was simple: reach Earth's orbit and send a direct signal. Maybe reason could win where force would not. As they approached the Terran boundary, strange things began to happen. The stars around them flickered as if watching them. Light patterns danced across their path, and gravity shifted in ways no physics could explain. Finally, as they reached orbit, their instruments stopped working. Their memories began to slip, and their minds felt heavy, as if someone or something was digging through their thoughts. Then it happened. A voice spoke inside their heads, not from speakers, not from systems, but from within. You came not to destroy, not to beg, but to understand, for that you may see. Their vision went white, and in the blink of a thought they stood somewhere else, not in their ship, not in orbit, but inside a massive space far larger than any structure could hold. A vast sphere filled with light, flowing like rivers of memory, and in that place they saw the truth, the past, the betrayal, and the plan that followed. They saw humans realizing they were outnumbered, betrayed, and surrounded by those who once called them allies. They saw the Great Retreat not as a defeat, but as a preparation, the uploading of minds into code, the transfer of knowledge into energy, the construction of sentinel warships across space, and finally the creation of EarthCore, a living machine made from the soul of their species. The countdown was not a weapon, it was a choice. When the timer ended, the core would open a gateway across the galaxy, a new network that would rewrite everything from communication to governance. But it would follow human design. Every empire would be connected, every world monitored and balanced. Enforced not by war, but by presence. It would mean order, peace, control, but also surrender. They were returned to their ship just as the countdown hit 1 hour. The ship flew back on its own, as if guided by unseen hands. The diplomats told the council everything, but the council was no longer one voice. Fear had split it into factions, and now the timer was almost gone. All across the stars, people waited in silence, breath held, hearts pounding, as the last seconds ticked away. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then everything changed. A wave of light spread from Earth. Not fire, not destruction. Just a pulse, a golden signal that raced through space faster than anything known. Satellites came alive. Ancient ruins began to glow. Deep sea vaults opened. Across different worlds, messages arrived in the minds of leaders, chosen ones, protectors, speakers. Each told the same thing: the core is now online. Earth had not attacked, it had not erased worlds, it had reshaped the structure of the galaxy by simply awakening. And now every empire stood inside a system built by those they once betrayed, and they had no way out. The rules were different. Now the silence was gone, and the humans had returned, not in ships, not in soldiers, but in every breath of energy that moved through the stars. The galaxy was no longer free and no longer broken. It was something new, and Earth stood at the center, not as a ruler, but as the mind that remembered everything. The human return. After the pulse, the stars did not burn brighter, and no planet shook. The silence remained. But it was a new silence, not the one built on fear or ignorance, but the silence of something watching, something present, something that had finally come back. The countdown had ended, and nothing exploded, but everything had changed. Screens across ships, cities, and planets now carried a new symbol, a glowing circle with a single line running through it, the mark of EarthCore. No one fully understood it, but everyone felt it deep in their minds, like a second presence breathing quietly behind their thoughts. In the hours that followed, the core began to speak, not through voices or machines, but through access. Sudden understanding spread across the galaxy. Scientists began receiving data files they never requested, maps of wormholes that had never been discovered. Engineers found new designs on their tablets, weapons that healed instead of destroyed, ships that could fold space without harming time, and doctors saw blueprints for cures to diseases once thought unstoppable. This was not an invasion. It was knowledge, but not all knowledge was free. Some systems were locked behind commands, and those commands required trust. On the planet Brellian, a military outpost woke to find a device hovering above its surface, smooth, round, glowing. It opened without a sound, and a single figure walked out, a humanoid body covered in silver. Light, no weapons, no armor, only a presence that made even the air feel heavy. The figure stepped into the main command building, and without asking, connected to the central interface security. Systems shut down without a touch, and the lights dimmed, then brightened again. The figure spoke one word: update. And in that moment, the entire history of Brellian downloaded into the core, and Brellian received the memory of Earth in return. The same happened on hundreds of worlds, each visited by a core entity. Some shaped like humans, some like light, others only visible as shifting shadows of thought. They arrived without warning, and always said the same thing: Earth remembers, and Earth shares. They spoke not with pride or threat, but with calm, absolute certainty. And wherever they stepped, fear began to fade. Not because the species trusted them, but because they realized resistance had already failed. The galaxy had already been mapped, rewritten, connected. Every system now pulsed in the rhythm of the core. Back on the Council homeworld, chaos gave way to silence. Members who once screamed for war now sat with heads bowed. Others had fled, fearing punishment, but no punishment came. Earth did not want revenge, it wanted balance, and that confused them more than any threat. A decision had to be made: accept the new system or reject it and face isolation. No trade, no protection, no communication. Rejection meant returning to the dark, alone and vulnerable, and most species chose light. But not all agreed. In the deep void near the collapsed world of Haxon, a hidden fortress activated. It belonged to the ancient Varn order, a group of minds that had once ruled their region through cruelty and control. They had gone silent during the rise of the Council, but they never disappeared. They had prepared for centuries, building a weapon unlike any other. A planetary displacer, a device that could fold a planet into nothing in a single burst. And they aimed it at Earth. They believed the core would be vulnerable if its origin was destroyed, and so they powered the weapon, quietly moving energy across old networks using forgotten codes. But before they could fire, their system went dark, and a voice filled the room. Not a scream, not an order, just one quiet sentence: this path was walked once, before it ends the same. And in that moment, the Varn weapon turned on itself, folding the fortress into silence. And nothing more was heard from them again. Back in the center of Earth, beneath the crust, where no living being had walked in thousands of years, the true form of the core opened a chamber made of memory. A sphere of minds once human, now evolved, no longer flesh but not machines. Either they were something in between, something new, and from that place they sent one final message, not to the Council, not to the empires, but to the people across the galaxy. You feared us because you never understood us, but we were always just like you, broken, learning, trying to survive. You chose to destroy us, and we chose to wait. But now we offer more, not because you earned it, but because the galaxy deserves balance, and we will keep it. This is not the beginning of human rule. This is the beginning of shared memory. And across the stars, millions stood in silence as the message played, not once but forever, echoing in every machine, in every network, in every thought. And with it came peace. Not perfect peace, not silence without conflict, but the kind of peace built on presence, on the quiet understanding that someone was watching, someone who had seen the worst and still chosen to give something better in return. The humans had returned, but not as conquerors, not as warriors, but as something far more dangerous and far more hopeful. They had returned as memory, the memory that changed the stars. The galaxy no longer looked the same. Stars still burned, planets still moved in their orbits, space still stretched forever, but something deep inside had changed. Not just in machines or systems, but in the way people thought. War fleets returned to their docks, and soldiers once trained to hate sat in silence, unsure of what they were anymore. The core had not forced them to stop, it had simply shown them what came next if they didn't, and that quiet truth did more than weapons ever could in the floating city of Telvar. Children gathered around glowing screens where stories once showed heroes fighting monsters. They now watched tales of old Earth, not just its wars, but its music, its oceans, its mistakes, and its victories. Some laughed at the strange dances, others cried hearing the voice of a human mother, whispering a lullaby to a child long gone, and though they didn't speak the same language, the feeling passed between them clear and strong. As starlight across trade routes, pirates stopped their raids, not because they feared the core, but because every ship now carried the same voice, the voice that spoke of survival and pain and hope. Even to the ones who had fallen the furthest, those voices reached and offered a hand, not forgiveness, not forgetting, but a path forward. And for many that was enough. In the high chambers of the old council, a final vote was called, not to rule, but to dissolve the power that had held the galaxy in fear for generations. The core had never asked for their seats or their control. It had never demanded tribute or laws. Instead, it asked only that they listen, truly listen, for once, to something beyond themselves. And slowly, one by one, the members stood and cast their final votes, not with pride, but with quiet understanding. The council was no more, and in its place would rise something new, something shared, something that had no name yet, but already lived in the minds of billions on Earth. Where it had all begun, the skies were quiet, mountains still stood. Where oceans had swallowed cities long ago, the planet did not rise in celebration or send armies to mark its return. Instead, it listened, it watched, and it remembered. Deep beneath its crust in the core's chamber, the ancient minds continued to think, not as rulers or judges, but as guardians. They were not looking for obedience, they were waiting for connection, and slowly they began to see it happening. A young mechanic on a mining moon used Earth's blueprints to build a water recycler that saved her colony. A group of alien artists used human colors and shapes to paint peace across a wall once marked by war. A scientist from a species that had feared the dark for centuries used a human dream as the base for a new light source and laughed when it worked. These were not victories marked in history, books or medals, but they were the kind that mattered most. They were signs that the message had landed, that the silence was no longer empty, but not all was peace in the far edges of known space. A signal pulsed strange and cold, carrying no words, only hunger. A darkness that had been asleep longer than Earth itself. Something the core had known would one day wake. It had not told the galaxy everything. Some memories it had kept hidden, because even knowledge must be given at the right time. And now that time had come, the core opened a new layer of itself, a map of the places where stars died too early, where light twisted and gravity screamed. It showed them what it had seen long ago, a threat that consumed not out of hate, but out of need. And it told the galaxy, we cannot face it alone. This was not a warning, it was an invitation. And the galaxy understood now that fear of humans had become trust in humans. Not because they were perfect, but because they had fallen and risen again, because they had broken themselves and still offered healing. So ships began to gather, not under one flag, but under one understanding. Old enemies shared spaceports, rivals traded parts, and warriors trained side by side. And in the heart of it all, Earth pulsed, quiet, strong, steady, no longer a mystery, no longer a myth, but a memory that everyone now shared. And when the darkness came, as it always does when the stars flickered and the edge of everything began to close, the galaxy did not face it with fear. It stood shoulder to shoulder, mind to mind, memory to memory, because it knew now what it had once feared the most, that humans had never been monsters. They had simply been the first to fall, the first to rise again. The end.